A single glance can carry a lifetime of memories, but sometimes the person who notices it is carrying the other half of the story. The lobby of Brooks' global headquarters shimmered beneath towering glass walls, where morning sunlight poured across polished marble like liquid gold, and every employee seemed to move with the confidence that came from belonging to one of the most successful companies in America. At exactly 8:12 a.m., conversation slowed as the elevator doors opened and Naomi Brooks stepped into the lobby. She wasn't simply the CEO. She was the woman whose name appeared on magazine covers, business podcasts, and television interviews, admired for transforming a struggling family company into a multi-billion-dollar enterprise without ever sacrificing her reputation for fairness. Dressed in a tailored navy suit, she acknowledged greetings with a calm smile that never felt rehearsed. Around her, executives straightened their jackets, assistants adjusted their tablets, and security quietly kept pace several feet behind without drawing attention. Near the far corner of the lobby, Ethan Walker stood beside a maintenance cart, tightening the handle on a rolling toolbox before beginning another ordinary workday. His denim work shirt was neatly pressed despite its age, and the silver wedding band he still wore caught a brief flash of sunlight whenever he reached for a wrench. Few people noticed him. Fewer still knew anything about the quiet father who left work every afternoon at exactly 4:30 so he could pick up his 8-year-old daughter, Lily, from elementary school. Ethan looked up as Naomi crossed the marble floor. His eyes followed her, not with admiration, not with envy, but with the stunned expression of someone who had just seen a ghost from another lifetime. The movement lasted only seconds, yet in a room full of curious observers, seconds were more than enough. Two young analysts exchanged amused glances. A receptionist covered a smile behind her coffee cup. Someone whispered that the maintenance guy had forgotten where he was. Another quietly laughed that everyone wanted a story about the famous CEO. Naomi stopped walking. The entire lobby seemed to inhale at once. Her security team hesitated. The executives froze. Ethan lowered his eyes immediately, embarrassed that anyone had even noticed. He expected a polite nod before she continued toward the elevators. Instead, Naomi changed direction and walked straight toward him, her heels echoing softly across the marble until the only sound left in the enormous lobby was the steady rhythm of each approaching step. Ethan's hands tightened around the toolbox handle. He searched for the right apology, even though he wasn't sure what he had done wrong. Naomi stopped only inches away. She studied his face with surprising gentleness, as though searching through years of forgotten memories instead of judging a stranger. The whispers around them faded into complete silence. Then, before anyone could guess what would happen next, Naomi leaned forward just enough for only Ethan to hear her voice. And in a whisper so soft it barely disturbed the still air, she asked, "You recognized the necklace, didn't you?" For a heartbeat, Ethan forgot where he was. His eyes drifted to the delicate silver necklace resting against Naomi Brooks's collarbone, and every sound inside the lobby dissolved into a distant hum. It was impossible. There could not be another pendant exactly like that one. His late wife, Claire, had spent years wearing the same tiny compass surrounded by a circle of wildflowers, a handcrafted piece from a small artisan shop in Asheville that had closed more than a decade earlier. Ethan swallowed slowly before answering. "I did not recognize you," he said in a quiet voice. "I recognized the necklace." Naomi searched his face with careful patience. There was no accusation in her expression anymore, only curiosity that seemed strangely personal. Before she could respond, one of her senior executives stepped forward with a reminder about a board meeting beginning in less than 10 minutes. She gave a polite nod without taking her eyes off Ethan. "Please wait here after your shift," she said softly. "I would like to speak with you privately." Then she turned and continued toward the executive elevators as if nothing unusual had happened. The lobby slowly came back to life, but the whispers returned louder than before. Some employees assumed Ethan had been reprimanded. Others guessed the maintenance worker had accidentally offended the chief executive. No one imagined that the conversation had revolved around a simple piece of jewelry. Ethan lowered his head and resumed checking light fixtures and hallway doors exactly as his schedule required. He had learned years ago that honest work deserved complete attention, no matter how distracted the heart became. Throughout the morning, memories slipped quietly into his thoughts. He remembered Claire laughing as she fastened the necklace before taking Lily to the county fair. He remembered her saying that a compass did not only help people find places. Sometimes it helped them find hope when life refused to make sense. After she passed away from an unexpected illness, Ethan had packed away every photograph that hurt too much to see. Yet he had never forgotten the necklace because it disappeared before the family gathered her belongings. He always believed it had simply been lost somewhere inside the hospital. By lunchtime, Ethan sat alone in the employee break room eating a homemade turkey sandwich while reading the latest library book Lily had tucked into his lunch bag with a handwritten note that said, "Do not forget to smile today, Daddy." He smiled without realizing it. Across the room, two custodians discussed weekend plans while a vending machine hummed softly in the background. His ordinary life had become peaceful again after years of quiet rebuilding, and he had never expected the past to walk through the front doors wearing an expensive business suit. Upstairs, Naomi stood beside the wide windows of her office overlooking the city skyline. The necklace rested lightly against her fingertips as she stared toward the streets below. She had searched for one family for almost 12 years, chasing fragments of forgotten records, unanswered letters, and faded memories that never quite led home. This morning, for the first time, someone had looked at the necklace not with admiration or curiosity, but with recognition. And deep inside her heart, a hope she had nearly buried forever began to breathe again. The afternoon passed with unusual stillness, yet the atmosphere inside Brooks Global felt subtly different, as though an invisible question had settled over every hallway. Ethan continued replacing ceiling lights, organizing storage shelves, and repairing loose cabinet hinges with the same steady rhythm that had defined his work for years. He greeted everyone with quiet respect, accepted every assignment without complaint, and never once looked toward the executive floor. The whispers, however, continued traveling much faster than he ever could. Some employees insisted the chief executive had personally warned him. Others imagined he would not be returning after today. A few simply shrugged, convinced that people in powerful offices lived by different rules than everyone else. Ethan paid no attention. He had spent enough years learning that rumors always disappeared faster than kindness. Every afternoon at 4:30, his thoughts belonged somewhere else entirely. They belonged to Lily. He pictured her waiting outside Jefferson Elementary with her bright purple backpack, always waving before she even spotted his old pickup truck. He smiled quietly while tightening the final screw on a conference room chair. She would probably ask whether he remembered to eat lunch. She always did. Upstairs, Naomi sat through financial presentations, acquisition reports, and quarterly forecasts, yet her attention drifted repeatedly toward the silver compass necklace resting against her fingertips. She had worn it every day for almost 12 years without fully understanding why she could never place it inside a jewelry box. It had become more than an accessory. It had become a promise she refused to forget. During a brief pause between meetings, she opened the locked drawer of her desk and removed a worn leather journal. Folded inside was a faded photograph of herself standing beside an ambulance many years earlier. The image had blurred around the edges, but one figure remained unmistakably clear. A smiling woman with warm eyes and shoulder-length brown hair stood beside her, wearing that exact necklace. Naomi gently traced the photograph before closing the journal once again. She had never learned where that woman went after that unforgettable day. Every search had ended with another unanswered question. Downstairs, Ethan finished his final work order and rolled his toolbox toward the maintenance office. His supervisor thanked him for another dependable day before mentioning that the chief executive's assistant had called twice asking Ethan not to leave without stopping by the executive floor. Ethan nodded politely, although uncertainty settled heavily across his shoulders. He wondered whether he should have simply explained everything that morning. Perhaps the conversation would already be over. Instead, the mystery had only grown larger. As the office emptied and the elevators became quieter, Ethan stepped inside one alone. The digital display climbed steadily toward the top floor, while soft instrumental music drifted through the polished cabin. Outside the wide glass walls, the late afternoon sun painted the skyline with deep shades of gold and amber. When the elevator doors opened, Naomi was already waiting in the reception area without assistants, without executives, and without security. She offered the same calm smile from that morning, but this time there was unmistakable emotion behind it. She held the old photograph carefully in both hands before looking into Ethan's eyes and asking with gentle sincerity, "Was the woman standing beside me in this picture your wife, Claire?" For several long seconds, Ethan could not answer. He looked at the photograph as though it had traveled across time, instead of sitting inside Naomi's hands. The image captured a younger Claire smiling with the quiet warmth that had always made strangers feel like family. Around her neck rested the familiar silver compass necklace, and standing beside her was Naomi, dressed in ordinary clothes, looking exhausted but unmistakably grateful. Ethan finally nodded, his voice almost disappearing into the peaceful silence of the executive reception area. "Yes," he whispered, "that is my wife." Naomi slowly closed her eyes, and the breath she released sounded like someone setting down a burden carried for far too many years. She invited Ethan into a private conference room where the city skyline stretched beyond floor-to-ceiling windows glowing beneath the soft colors of the setting sun. There were no reporters, no executives, and no interruptions, only two people connected by a memory neither of them had expected to find again. Naomi carefully placed the photograph on the polished table before reaching for the necklace resting against her collarbone. "I have waited 12 years to ask someone that question," she said gently. "I never stopped hoping I would meet her family." Ethan lowered himself into the chair across from her, his hands folded quietly together. He was not searching for explanations. He was simply listening. Naomi smiled sadly before beginning the story she had replayed in her heart countless times. 12 years earlier, she had not been a celebrated chief executive. She had been a young entrepreneur struggling to keep a tiny technology company alive while caring for her father during his final illness. The pressure had become overwhelming, and one rainy afternoon, she had collapsed from exhaustion outside a small community medical clinic in western North Carolina. Most people hurried past, too busy to notice another stranger having a difficult day. Claire had not. She stayed beside Naomi for hours, speaking with calm reassurance until help arrived, refusing every offer of payment, and reminding a frightened young woman that accepting kindness was never a sign of weakness. Before leaving, Claire gently removed the compass necklace from around her own neck and placed it into Naomi's hands. She smiled and said, "Keep this until life gives you a reason to believe in tomorrow again." Ethan felt tears gathering, not from sadness alone, but from hearing words he recognized immediately. Claire often believed that hope became stronger only after it had been shared. Naomi continued softly. She searched for Claire a few weeks later, intending to return the necklace and thank her properly, but the clinic had no forwarding address, and every trail eventually disappeared. Years passed. Her business slowly flourished, her responsibilities grew, yet the necklace remained close to her heart because it reminded her of the woman who had helped her believe that success meant very little unless it was matched by compassion. Ethan reached into his wallet and removed a small family photograph worn gently around the edges. It showed Claire standing between him and a 4-year-old Lily, all three laughing beneath bright autumn leaves. Naomi studied the picture with trembling hands before looking back at Ethan. In that quiet room overlooking the city, the mystery that had begun with a single glance was transforming into something neither of them had expected, not a coincidence, but the beginning of a promise finally finding its way home. The conference room remained quiet long after either of them stopped speaking. Outside the glass walls, the city lights slowly replaced the fading sunset, each window glowing like another story unfolding somewhere beyond their own. Ethan carefully returned the family photograph to his wallet, his fingers lingering for a moment on Claire's smiling face before folding the leather closed. Naomi held the compass necklace in the palm of her hand, turning it gently beneath the warm light above the table. "I used to wonder why she trusted a complete stranger," she said softly. "Now I think she simply saw people differently than the rest of us." Ethan smiled with quiet affection. Claire believed everyone carried a burden you could not see. She always said kindness costs less than judgment. Naomi nodded slowly, recognizing the same wisdom that had carried her through the hardest years of her life. She opened a folder that had remained untouched beside her chair. Inside were newspaper clippings, handwritten notes, copies of old inquiries, and dozens of names crossed out one after another. "This is every place I searched," she admitted. "Hospitals, churches, community centers, old business records. Every lead disappeared. Eventually people told me I should stop looking and move on." Ethan glanced through the pages before quietly asking, "Why did you keep searching?" Naomi answered without hesitation, "Because one afternoon changed everything for me. My company survived because I found hope before I found success. I promised myself that if I ever had the chance, I would thank the woman who reminded me that my future was worth fighting for." A gentle silence settled between them again. It was not uncomfortable. It was the peaceful silence that follows the truth finally finding the right place to rest. Naomi looked toward the city before turning back to Ethan. "May I ask about Lily?" she said. Ethan's expression brightened immediately. He reached for his phone and smiled as he opened the latest photograph. Lily stood beside a handmade science fair project wearing a bright blue ribbon and an even brighter grin. Naomi laughed softly. "She has her mother's smile." Ethan nodded. "Every single day she reminds me that hope still lives in this world." Naomi studied the picture for another moment before closing the folder. "Tomorrow evening our foundation is hosting a small community dinner for employees and their families. It is not a business event. It is simply people sharing a meal together. Would you and Lily allow me to meet the little girl whose mother changed my life?" Ethan hesitated, not because he doubted her sincerity, but because his life had become beautifully simple after years of rebuilding. He had learned to protect that quiet peace. Naomi understood the pause before he spoke. "There will be no cameras," she said gently. "No announcements. No speeches. I only want the opportunity to thank the family I never stopped searching for." Ethan looked once more at the necklace resting around her neck, then remembered the promise Claire had always repeated whenever fear tried to close another door. "Trust the people who honor kindness with humility." He smiled for the first time since entering the executive floor. "Lily would like that," he said quietly. Naomi smiled back, and for the first time in 12 long years, gratitude no longer felt like an unfinished promise. It finally felt like the beginning of something worthy of Claire's extraordinary gift. The following evening arrived wrapped in the gentle warmth of early autumn, and Brooks Global looked nothing like the fast-paced corporate headquarters Ethan knew during the workweek. The marble lobby had been transformed with round tables, fresh flowers, soft piano music, and photographs celebrating employees volunteering in schools, food banks, and neighborhood charities. Children laughed near a small dessert table, while parents exchanged quiet conversations that had nothing to do with quarterly reports or business goals. Ethan parked his aging pickup truck near the entrance, and before he even turned off the engine, Lily was already smiling through the passenger window. "Daddy, are you nervous?" she asked with the remarkable honesty that only children possessed. Ethan laughed softly. "A little." Lily reached across the seat and squeezed his hand. "Mom always said that good people usually make us nervous because they remind us to be brave." Ethan looked toward the evening sky for a brief moment, silently thanking Claire for somehow continuing to shape their lives through the heart of their daughter. Inside the building, Naomi stood near the entrance greeting every employee by name, thanking spouses for their support, and kneeling to speak with children at eye level instead of towering above them. The executives who usually surrounded her were absent. Tonight, she was simply a gracious host. When she noticed Ethan and Lily walking through the front doors, her face brightened with genuine happiness. She crossed the lobby without hesitation and stopped in front of Lily first. "You must be Lily Walker," she said warmly. Lily smiled politely. "Yes, ma'am." Naomi gently shook her head. "Please call me Naomi." Lily looked toward her father for permission before answering. "It is nice to meet you, Naomi." Naomi's eyes softened immediately. There was something familiar about the little girl's kindness, something that echoed Claire's gentle spirit in ways words could not explain. She reached into a nearby gift bag and handed Lily a beautifully wrapped journal with a fountain pen tied neatly across the top using a blue ribbon. "Your mother inspired someone to keep believing in tomorrow," Naomi said quietly. "I hope this helps you write your own beautiful tomorrows one day." Lily accepted the gift carefully as though it were something precious. "Thank you," she whispered. "I love writing stories." Ethan watched the exchange in complete silence. There was no display of wealth, no attempt to impress anyone, only sincere gratitude expressed through simple generosity. During dinner, they shared stories instead of business plans. Naomi listened as Lily described science projects, library books, and her dream of becoming a teacher because, as she proudly explained, teachers help people discover who they could become. Ethan smiled every time Lily spoke, never interrupting, only encouraging her quiet confidence with patient attention. Naomi noticed everything. She noticed the way Ethan always served Lily before filling his own plate. She noticed how he never checked his phone while his daughter was talking. She noticed the peaceful dignity that surrounded him, the same quiet strength Claire had carried years before. As the evening drew to a close, a small jazz trio began playing gentle melodies near the windows overlooking the city lights. Lily wandered toward the dance floor with several children while Naomi and Ethan stood nearby, watching them laugh together. Without thinking, Naomi turned toward Ethan. Their eyes met, and this time there was no misunderstanding between them, only shared gratitude. She reached out and gave his hand a gentle squeeze. Ethan returned the gesture with quiet respect, and in that simple moment, neither of them realized that the promise Claire had made so many years ago was no longer guiding only one life. It was gently leading two wounded hearts toward the possibility of healing together. Over the next several weeks, an unexpected rhythm quietly settled into their lives. Ethan returned to his daily work with the same humility that had always defined him, never mentioning his private conversations with Naomi to anyone inside the company. Naomi did the same. She never gave him special treatment, never moved him into a different position, and never allowed gratitude to become favoritism. Instead, she offered something Ethan valued far more than recognition. She offered respect. Employees gradually noticed that whenever the chief executive crossed paths with the maintenance staff, she greeted each person by name, asked about their families, and thanked them sincerely before continuing on her way. The change spread through the building like sunlight entering a room one window at a time. Managers became more attentive. Executives lingered to help instead of hurrying past. People who had once measured importance by job titles slowly began measuring it by character. Ethan never claimed credit for any of it. He simply continued fixing broken doors, replacing worn fixtures, and leaving every space better than he found it. One Friday afternoon, Lily waited in the lobby after school while Ethan finished repairing a conference room projector. She sat quietly on a leather sofa, writing in the journal Naomi had given her. When Naomi happened to walk by after a meeting, she noticed the little girl concentrating so deeply that she barely looked up. "May I ask what you are writing?" Naomi said with a warm smile. Lily closed the journal gently before answering. "It is a list of people who make the world feel safer." Naomi smiled. "That sounds like a very important list." Lily nodded. "My mom is first because she taught Daddy how to be brave. Daddy is second because he never quits even when life is hard. And you are third." Naomi looked genuinely surprised. "Me?" Lily smiled with complete sincerity. "You make Daddy smile again. He did not smile this much before he met you." Naomi felt her heart grow unexpectedly quiet. Before she could answer, Ethan returned carrying his toolbox. Lily ran over, slipped her small hand into his, and looked up at both adults with innocent confidence. "Can we all get ice cream tomorrow?" she asked. Ethan chuckled softly. "That depends on whether Naomi has time." Naomi laughed for the first time in days. "I think I can make time for ice cream." The next afternoon, they visited a small family-owned ice cream shop just outside town where nobody treated Naomi like a famous executive. She ordered chocolate, Ethan chose butter pecan, and Lily proudly mixed strawberry with rainbow sprinkles because she insisted life should always have a little color. They sat outside beneath old maple trees while children chased bubbles across the sidewalk and neighbors greeted one another without hurry. There were no expensive restaurants, no luxury cars on display, and no conversations about business acquisitions. Naomi realized she had not enjoyed such a peaceful afternoon in years. As the sun began to sink behind the trees, Lily wandered a few yards away to watch a street musician playing gentle acoustic guitar. Naomi turned toward Ethan, her expression thoughtful. "Claire once gave me hope when I had nothing left to believe in," she said quietly. "I thought I had spent 12 years searching for a family so I could repay a debt. Now I think I was searching because I needed to find the kind of people I never wanted to lose again." Ethan looked at her with calm honesty. "Some gifts cannot be repaid," he answered. "They can only be passed on." Naomi nodded slowly, and somewhere deep inside her heart, gratitude was quietly beginning to grow into something even more beautiful. Autumn slowly gave way to winter, and with each passing week the bond between Ethan, Lily, and Naomi grew naturally, never rushed and never forced. Their lives remained beautifully ordinary. Some evenings they shared dinner at a neighborhood diner where the waitress already knew Lily would order grilled cheese with tomato soup. Other weekends they visited the public library, where Lily proudly introduced Naomi to every shelf she loved as though she were giving a personal tour of the greatest place on earth. Ethan watched quietly from a distance, grateful that his daughter had found another adult who listened more than she spoke. One crisp Saturday morning, Naomi invited them to attend the opening of a new learning center funded by the Brooks Foundation. The building stood in a quiet neighborhood where children often lacked access to books, computers, and after-school programs. Reporters gathered outside expecting another speech celebrating the company's charitable work, but Naomi had something very different planned. Standing before teachers, volunteers, community leaders, and employees, she smiled warmly before stepping away from the podium. "Today," she said, "I would rather introduce someone who taught me what leadership truly means." Confused, whispers drifted through the audience as Naomi walked directly toward Ethan, who had been standing quietly beside Lily near the back of the room. Ethan immediately shook his head, uncomfortable with becoming the center of attention. Naomi simply smiled with understanding. "Please trust me," she said softly. Together they stepped onto the small stage. Cameras focused on the famous chief executive, expecting another announcement about expansion, innovation, or philanthropy. Instead, Naomi told a different story. She spoke about a stranger's kindness many years earlier. She described a woman who gave away her treasured necklace instead of keeping it for herself. She spoke about a husband who continued honoring that same spirit every single day by raising a compassionate daughter with quiet dignity instead of bitterness. She never mentioned wealth. She never praised herself. She simply looked toward Ethan and said, "The strongest people I have ever known were never the loudest. They changed lives without asking for applause." The room became completely silent. Many employees who had once whispered about Ethan lowered their eyes with quiet reflection. They remembered the rumors, the assumptions, and the careless judgments that had spread through the lobby only weeks before. Ethan stood with the same humility he had always carried, neither embarrassed nor proud. He simply accepted the moment with grace because he knew it was not really about him. It was about Claire's legacy continuing to touch lives long after she was gone. Then Naomi reached into a velvet case resting on the podium. She carefully removed the silver compass necklace and walked toward Ethan. "This never truly belonged to me," she said gently. "It belonged to the woman who believed hope should always be shared. I carried it until I found the family she loved most." She placed the necklace into Ethan's hands. He looked at it quietly before kneeling beside Lily. Without saying a word, he fastened the necklace around his daughter's neck. Lily touched the tiny compass with careful fingers, tears shining gently in her eyes. "I will take good care of it," she whispered. Naomi smiled through tears of gratitude, and every person in the room understood that the greatest inheritance is never measured in dollars or titles. It is measured in the kindness that continues guiding hearts long after the hands that first offered it are gone. Winter quietly surrendered to spring, and the world outside seemed to awaken at the same gentle pace as the three lives that had slowly become intertwined. Cherry blossoms lined the sidewalks outside Lily's school. Sunlight lingered a little longer each evening, and Ethan found himself noticing small moments he had almost forgotten to appreciate. The sound of Lily laughing while practicing piano after homework. The familiar ring of Naomi's voice when she called simply to ask how their day had been. The peaceful comfort of knowing that some people entered your life not to replace what had been lost, but to honor it by helping something new begin. One Saturday afternoon, nearly a year after that unforgettable morning in the lobby, Ethan and Lily invited Naomi to visit the small hillside where Claire rested beneath an old maple tree overlooking the valley. The grass had turned bright green again, and wildflowers danced gently in the breeze, just as they always had every spring. Lily carefully knelt beside the headstone and placed a small bouquet of white daisies against the polished granite. Around her neck rested the silver compass necklace, shining softly beneath the afternoon sun. Ethan stood quietly for a long moment before speaking. I used to think loving someone meant never letting go, he said. Now I think it also means allowing the goodness they left behind to keep growing. Naomi stepped closer, her eyes filled with quiet gratitude. Your wife changed my future with one afternoon of kindness, she whispered. I hope every choice I make from now on honors the gift she gave me. Lily reached for Naomi's hand with the simple confidence only a child could possess. Mom would like you, she said with a gentle smile. She always said our family would get bigger because love likes to make room. Ethan felt emotion rise in his chest, but instead of sadness, it was peaceful gratitude. Naomi looked at him, and without saying a word, he understood everything in her eyes. There was no pressure, no dramatic promise, and no perfect fairy tale waiting around the corner. There was only respect, friendship, healing, and the quiet possibility that two hearts shaped by loss could choose hope again together. As they walked back toward the parking lot, Lily skipped a few steps ahead before turning around with the bright smile that always reminded Ethan of Claire. Come on, she called happily. We still have to get ice cream. Ethan laughed, and Naomi joined him. Their laughter drifted across the hillside, light and genuine, carried gently by the spring breeze. Months later, Brooks Global introduced a new annual scholarship in Claire Walker's name for students who demonstrated compassion through everyday acts of kindness rather than academic achievements alone. Ethan never asked for the recognition, and Naomi never announced that the inspiration came from the woman who had once saved her life with nothing more than patience, hope, and a simple silver necklace. Some stories begin with grand speeches. Others begin with impossible coincidences. But the ones people remember forever often begin with a quiet glance, a whispered question, and the courage to look beyond appearances. Because dignity does not demand attention. Kindness does not keep score. And sometimes the greatest love story is not about finding someone to erase the past. It is about finding someone willing to walk beside you while honoring every beautiful memory that made you who you are today.